Hey guys! Tonight, we're taking a peaceful journey back to discover what dating was really like in the Middle Ages. But before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see people joining us from all around the world. Now, get comfortable, settle beneath your blanket, and let the day slowly fade away. The first light of dawn spills gently across rolling green hills as a light mist drifts over a quiet medieval village. Church bells ring softly in the distance, birds welcome the morning, and thin trails of smoke rise from thatched cottages. Somewhere along these peaceful lanes, two young villagers are about to cross paths for the very first time. So close your eyes, relax, and let's wander into the gentle world of medieval courtship. Growing up in a medieval village, where every love story quietly began. Imagine, if you will, that the morning mist has begun to lift from the little village we glimpsed just moments ago. The first golden rays of sunlight stretch across rolling fields, catching tiny drops of dew that sparkle like scattered jewels upon the grass. A cool breeze carries the earthy scent of damp soil, fresh hay, and wood smoke drifting lazily from the chimneys of thatched cottages. Somewhere nearby, a rooster announces the start of another ordinary day, while the steady ringing of distant church bells gently reminds everyone that morning has arrived. Follow the narrow dirt path beneath the shade of ancient oak trees. Chickens wander freely across the lane, completely unbothered by anyone passing by. A sleepy dog lazily lifts its head before settling back into the warm straw outside a cottage door. Beyond the village lies a patchwork of green fields, divided not by fences, but by narrow footpaths that generations have walked before us. This peaceful little settlement is home to perhaps 200 or 300 people. Nearly everyone knows everyone else. News travels quickly here not because of newspapers or telephones, but because conversations happen face to face. A visit to the village well, a Sunday church service, or an afternoon at the mill is enough for everyone to learn the latest happenings. If you hope to keep a secret in a medieval village, you would probably be disappointed. Now, when many of us imagine romance in the Middle Ages, our minds often drift toward towering castles, shining knights, elegant princesses, or dramatic declarations of love beneath moonlit balconies. Stories and films have painted that picture for generations. But the truth was usually much quieter. Most people who lived during the Middle Ages were not nobles at all. They were farmers, craftsmen, shepherds, millers, bakers, blacksmiths, and laborers. Their lives revolved around the changing seasons, the weather, their families, and the land that provided nearly everything they needed. And it was among these ordinary people that most medieval love stories quietly began. Unlike today, childhood was not divided into school years filled with homework, sports clubs, and holidays. Formal education was limited, especially for ordinary villagers. Instead, children learned by watching the adults around them. A young boy might spend his mornings following his father into the fields, learning how to guide an ox pulling a wooden plow. At first, he simply watched. Later, he carried tools. Eventually, he learned to work the land himself. A young girl often learned beside her mother, helping grind grain into flour, collecting eggs from restless hens, tending the vegetable garden, spinning wool into thread, or stirring a pot of thick vegetable stew over the family hearth. Of course, these roles were not perfectly fixed everywhere. Every family had its own needs, and during busy seasons, everyone helped wherever they were most useful. Harvest time, especially, demanded every willing pair of hands, no matter how young. Even so, childhood was not entirely consumed by work. Whenever the day's chores were finished, children found ways to enjoy themselves with remarkable creativity. Without toy stores or glowing screens, entertainment came from imagination. They played simple chasing games across grassy meadows. They skipped smooth stones across quiet streams. They carved whistles from willow branches, balanced along fallen tree trunks, or invented games using little more than sticks, pebbles, and boundless imagination. Laughter echoed through the village just as it does today. Boys and girls often played together when they were young. There was little reason not to. The village was small, and everyone belonged to the same close-knit community. They knew one another's parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters, and even family animals. Friendships formed naturally. The baker's son might spend every afternoon exploring the woods with the shepherd's daughter. The miller's children might race against the blacksmith's children beside the river. During long summer evenings, groups of youngsters wandered together beneath wide blue skies until the fading sunlight reminded them it was time to return home. No one thought of these friendships as romance. They were simply children growing up together. As the years quietly passed, the seasons marked the rhythm of life. Spring covered the countryside with wildflowers. Summer filled the fields with waving grain. Autumn painted the forests gold and amber. Winter wrapped everything beneath frost and silence. Year after year, the same familiar faces grew taller. Children slowly became young adults. And because the village was small, everyone noticed. The elderly women chatting beside the well would smile knowingly. "My goodness," one might quietly remark. "Hasn't Thomas grown this year?" And little Agnes, another would reply with a warm laugh. "She isn't little anymore." Such conversations were common, spoken without judgment, simply acknowledging how quickly time seemed to pass. Life itself moved at a wonderfully gentle pace. There were no rushing cars, no ringing phones, no overflowing inboxes demanding immediate attention. A walk to the neighboring village might take an hour or more, giving people plenty of time to observe birds nesting in hedgerows, butterflies floating above wildflowers, or clouds drifting slowly across the endless sky. Silence was never truly silent. It was filled with birdsong, the rustling of leaves, the distant lowing of cattle, the steady creak of wooden cart wheels, the soft splash of water flowing through nearby streams. For many listeners today, that world may sound almost impossibly peaceful. Of course, medieval life was far from easy. There was hard work, uncertainty, illness, and many hardships we would rather avoid. Yet alongside those difficulties existed moments of remarkable calm, moments that unfolded naturally because life followed the steady rhythm of nature itself. Children grew up surrounded by familiar faces rather than strangers. Their world was small, but it was deeply connected. Long before anyone spoke of courtship, engagements, or marriage, something much simpler was taking shape. Trust, friendship, shared memories. The boy who helped carry buckets from the village well. The girl who laughed when everyone slipped in the muddy lane after a spring rain. The childhood companion who gathered blackberries beside you every summer. These quiet moments rarely seemed important at the time. Yet they often became the foundation upon which future relationships were built. And as our peaceful walk through this little village continues, we will soon discover that growing older brought entirely new feelings, subtle at first, almost unnoticed, arriving as gently as the changing of the seasons themselves. But that is a story for the next part of our journey. When childhood quietly became courtship. As the sun climbs a little higher above the village rooftops, the cool morning mist has almost completely disappeared. The fields shimmer beneath the warm light, and the day's work is already well underway. Farmers move steadily behind their oxen, women gather herbs from their gardens, and the familiar sound of a blacksmith's hammer rings softly across the square. Everything unfolds at an unhurried pace, as though the village itself is breathing in slow, gentle rhythm. Our walk continues along a winding footpath that leads beyond the cottages and toward the open meadows. Here, life changes almost so gradually that those living it may hardly notice at all. Only a few years ago, the children running through these fields thought little about the future. Their greatest concerns were climbing trees, chasing geese, or finding the sweetest berries hidden among the hedgerows. But time, as it always does, quietly moves forward. The boys who once struggled to lift bundles of firewood now carry them with ease. Their shoulders grow broader from years of working the land, repairing fences, tending animals, and helping their fathers with the harvest. Their hands become rough from rope, wood, and soil, each callus telling the story of another season spent outdoors. The girls, too, become increasingly skilled in the many tasks that keep a household running. They bake bread in stone ovens, spin wool into fine thread, brew simple ales, milk cows before sunrise, and care for younger brothers and sisters. What once seemed difficult has become second nature through years of quiet practice. There is no grand ceremony announcing that childhood has ended. Instead, adulthood arrives slowly, one season at a time. People in the village begin to notice these changes. A passing neighbor smiles kindly and remarks how tall someone has grown. An older woman compliments a young girl's beautifully woven cloth. A farmer nods with quiet approval as a young man confidently handles a team of oxen without assistance. These small observations carry meaning. They are gentle signs that the younger generation is becoming ready to take its place within the community. With growing age comes greater responsibility, but it also brings new opportunities to spend time together. Many daily tasks are shared. During harvest, long lines of villagers work side by side beneath the summer sun, gathering wheat with sickles while exchanging cheerful conversation. In autumn, families join together to collect apples, press cider, or gather firewood before winter arrives. Work is rarely done alone. And because everyone works together, friendships naturally continue to deepen. Unlike modern dating, there are no carefully planned evenings at restaurants or quiet coffee shops. There are no text messages waiting to be answered or photographs shared across the world in an instant. Instead, affection grows through ordinary moments. A young man might quietly offer to carry an especially heavy basket for someone after a long day in the fields. A young woman may save the freshest loaf of bread for a neighbor's family after hearing someone has fallen ill. Kindness often speaks louder than words. In a small village, people notice these thoughtful gestures. Reputation matters greatly. Someone known for honesty, generosity, patience, and hard work is admired not because they seek attention, but because these qualities make life better for everyone around them. As the seasons continue to pass, village gatherings become especially important. On Sundays, after church services end, people rarely hurry straight home. Instead, they linger outside the stone church, exchanging greetings, discussing the weather, sharing news, or simply enjoying each other's company beneath the open sky. Children chase one another across the churchyard while the older villagers chat in small groups. Young adults often find themselves standing nearby, joining conversations that seem entirely ordinary. Yet perhaps someone smiles just a little longer than before. Perhaps two people discover they enjoy talking about the same things. Nothing dramatic happens. Everything unfolds naturally. Throughout the year, festivals provide another welcome break from daily work. The arrival of spring, the completion of harvest, or important feast days bring the whole village together. Long wooden tables are carried outside, musicians tune simple fiddles and pipes, and neighbors share bread, cheese, roasted meats, fresh fruit, and mugs of ale. Music drifts gently through the evening air. Children dance first, laughing without care. Soon the adults join them. The dances themselves are simple, lively, and communal. They are not grand ballroom performances but cheerful circles and lines where everyone knows the steps because they have danced them since childhood. For some young villagers, these evenings become quietly memorable. Not because of dramatic romance, but because someone who had always been just another familiar face suddenly seems a little different. Perhaps it is the way the golden light of sunset catches their smile. Perhaps it is hearing them laugh across the village green. Or perhaps it is simply realizing that the friend they have known for years has grown into someone they admire in an entirely new way. These feelings arrive gently, almost unnoticed, like the first warm breeze after a long winter. No one rushes them. Life itself encourages patience. Courtship in the Middle Ages often unfolded over months or even years. Families already knew one another well, and trust was built gradually through everyday life rather than grand romantic gestures. Love, for most ordinary villagers, was not something that appeared overnight. It was something that quietly grew from shared experiences, familiar conversations, and countless ordinary days spent side by side. As evening approaches, our village begins to settle once again. The golden sun sinks slowly behind distant hills, bathing the fields in soft amber light. Smoke rises peacefully from cottage chimneys as families gather for their evening meal. Somewhere, a shepherd whistles gently while leading his flock home. The blacksmith closes his workshop, and the last cart creaks slowly along the dusty road. One by one, candles begin to glow behind tiny cottage windows. The village grows quieter. Above, the first stars appear in the deepening blue sky. And as we leave these peaceful lanes behind, we carry with us a simple truth. Before medieval courtship ever truly began, it was built upon years of friendship, shared work, quiet kindness, and the comforting familiarity of a close-knit community. Where hearts happen to meet. Sundays, markets, and familiar faces. The stars that watched over our little village slowly fade as another peaceful dawn arrives. A soft golden light spreads across the countryside, warming the dew-covered fields and gently waking the world once again. Thin ribbons of smoke rise from cottage chimneys, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell rings through the cool morning air. The sound carries across meadows and woodlands alike, calling the villagers together for the most important gathering of the week. Our quiet walk continues. We've already seen how friendships formed naturally during childhood, but now those children have grown into young men and women. The question is a simple one: if there were no dating apps, cafes, cinemas, or evening strolls through city streets, where did people actually meet someone they might one day marry? The answer is surprisingly ordinary. They met almost everywhere life brought them together. Perhaps the most important meeting place was the village church. For medieval people, church was much more than a place of worship. It was the very heart of the community. Every Sunday, and on many holy days throughout the year, nearly everyone gathered beneath its stone walls. Farmers arrived wearing their cleanest wool tunics. Women carefully brushed their hair before covering it with linen veils. Children did their best to remain quiet, though they rarely succeeded for very long. Inside, candles flickered gently against ancient stone walls while sunlight filtered through colorful stained glass windows. The air carried the faint scent of beeswax and incense, creating an atmosphere that felt calm and timeless. Services could be long, especially for those standing throughout much of them, but afterward came something many villagers looked forward to just as much. No one hurried home. Instead, families lingered outside the church doors, exchanging greetings and catching up on the week's events. Small groups formed beneath shady trees while children laughed nearby. News spread naturally from one conversation to another. Someone's cow had given birth. A neighboring village planned a summer fair. The mill wheel needed repairs. A traveler had passed through with stories from distant towns. For young people, these gatherings offered something equally valuable. A chance to simply be seen. A young man might respectfully greet a family he had known for years, exchanging a few friendly words before helping an elderly neighbor carry a basket home. A young woman might laugh softly while speaking with friends, her cheerful voice drifting across the churchyard on the gentle breeze. Nothing about these moments seemed especially romantic. And yet, they mattered. In a world where daily life revolved around work, church gatherings allowed people to slow down, notice one another, and enjoy the company of friends beyond their immediate households. Everyone understood the quiet rhythm of these meetings. There was no expectation that every conversation would lead to courtship. Most did not. But every lasting relationship had to begin somewhere. Sometimes it began with nothing more than a familiar smile exchanged every Sunday morning. As we continue our stroll beyond the church, the narrow road widens into another lively gathering place, the weekly market. For villagers, market day was something of a celebration. People traveled from neighboring hamlets, bringing carts filled with vegetables, cheese, eggs, woven cloth, wooden bowls, herbs, honey, and freshly baked bread. Merchants displayed colorful ribbons, iron tools, pottery, and spices that had journeyed incredible distances before finally arriving here. The village suddenly felt much larger than usual. Voices filled the air. Children darted between stalls. Dogs eagerly searched for dropped scraps of food. Musicians occasionally played cheerful tunes while traveling entertainers performed simple tricks to delighted audiences. The market offered something wonderfully rare. It introduced new faces. Although most marriages happened between people living fairly close to one another, markets allowed villagers to meet those from neighboring communities they might otherwise never encounter. Perhaps a shepherd from the next valley stopped to admire a blacksmith's work. Perhaps a baker's daughter purchased fresh apples from a farmer she had never met before. Perhaps two strangers found themselves reaching for the same basket of ripe pears. Life has always been filled with such small coincidences. Unlike modern dating, there was little pressure to impress through expensive clothing or elaborate gifts. Cleanliness, good manners, honesty, and a cheerful reputation mattered far more than displays of wealth among ordinary villagers. People observed one another naturally. Was someone polite? Did they work hard? Were they kind to older neighbors? Did they keep their promises? These qualities were noticed long before anyone thought about marriage. And because villages were tightly connected, reputations traveled almost as quickly as conversations. If someone was known for generosity, nearly everyone knew it. If someone frequently caused trouble, that too became common knowledge. In many ways, medieval courtship began not with romance but with trust. That trust grew quietly through years of shared experiences. As afternoon sunlight stretches across the bustling marketplace, our gentle walk slows once again. Merchants begin packing away their goods, wagons creak softly toward distant villages, and the lively chatter gradually fades into peaceful evening silence. Today's journey has shown us that finding someone special rarely depended on dramatic chance. Instead, love often began in the most ordinary places imaginable. Outside a village church, beside a market stall, during a friendly conversation, or simply by seeing the same familiar face, week after week, until one day it somehow seemed different. But our story is only just beginning. In the next part of this chapter, we'll visit the happiest days of the medieval year, vibrant festivals, joyful harvest celebrations, lively village dances, and seasonal feasts, where music echoed late into the evening and many hearts quietly began to beat just a little faster. Festivals beneath the summer sky. As the busy marketplace slowly empties behind us, let us continue our gentle walk along a narrow country lane. The afternoon sun hangs low in the sky, casting long golden shadows across fields of ripening grain. A warm breeze carries the sweet scent of wildflowers and freshly cut hay, while swallows swoop gracefully overhead. Somewhere ahead, faint laughter and the sound of music drift through the peaceful countryside. It seems we've arrived just in time for one of the happiest occasions in the medieval calendar. For ordinary villagers, festivals were far more than simple celebrations. They were precious moments when the hard work of everyday life paused, if only for a little while. Fields could wait until tomorrow. Tools were laid aside. Even the busiest families found time to gather with neighbors, friends, and visitors from nearby villages. If church brought everyone together in quiet reflection, festivals brought them together in joy. The village green, usually a peaceful stretch of grass where children chased chickens and geese wandered freely, was transformed into a lively gathering place. Long wooden tables stood beneath shady trees, covered with loaves of bread, wheels of cheese, roasted meats, fresh fruit, honey, and steaming pots of vegetable stew. Clay jugs filled with ale and cider passed from hand to hand, while laughter floated gently through the warm evening air. There was no grand stage, no bright electric lights, and no loudspeakers filling the countryside with music. Instead, entertainment was wonderfully simple. A fiddler tuned his instrument beneath an old oak tree. A piper joined him with cheerful melodies that carried across the fields. Sometimes a drummer added a steady rhythm, encouraging children and soon adults to begin dancing. The dances themselves were nothing like the carefully choreographed performances we often see in films. Most were communal dances, where neighbors formed circles or long lines, stepping together in patterns they had known since childhood. Everyone was welcome, whether young or old, graceful or clumsy. If someone missed a step, laughter usually followed, not embarrassment. These festivals offered young people something that daily work rarely allowed: time to relax. A young man who normally spent every daylight hour tending sheep could now spend an evening talking with friends beneath the fading sunlight. A young woman who baked bread before dawn every morning might finally have time to join the dancing or stroll through the fair with her family. There was no expectation that every conversation carried romantic meaning. But opportunities naturally appeared. Perhaps two neighbors who usually exchanged only brief greetings while working in nearby fields now found themselves standing together beneath the shade of an ancient tree, watching children play simple games. Perhaps someone offered another person a seat at the feast. Perhaps they laughed together over a traveling juggler's amusing performance. Small moments. Ordinary moments. The kind that quietly linger in memory. As daylight softened into evening, the village often became even more beautiful. Lanterns flickered outside cottages. The setting sun painted the fields with shades of gold and amber. Birdsong slowly gave way to the gentle chorus of crickets hidden among the grass. Couples and families wandered leisurely along familiar paths, enjoying the cool evening after a warm day's celebration. For many young people, these peaceful walks offered rare chances to talk without the constant demands of work surrounding them. Of course, complete privacy was unusual. The village was small, and relatives were rarely very far away. Parents, older siblings, neighbors, and family friends remained close enough to keep a watchful eye, not out of suspicion, but because communities naturally looked after one another. Courtship was generally expected to unfold with respect and patience. Even so, a quiet conversation while walking home beneath a sky filled with stars could become one of life's most treasured memories. Throughout the year, different festivals marked the changing seasons. Spring celebrations welcomed warmer days after the long cold of winter. Fresh flowers decorated cottages, children gathered blossoms into simple garlands, and everyone seemed eager to spend more time outdoors. Summer brought long evenings that seemed almost endless. Harvest had not yet reached its busiest days, leaving room for gatherings, music, and shared meals beneath clear skies. Autumn festivals carried a different feeling altogether. The fields stood golden with ripe grain. Apples hung heavy from orchard trees, and wagons overflowing with vegetables rolled steadily toward the village. There was deep satisfaction in seeing another successful harvest safely gathered before winter arrived. These celebrations often felt especially joyful because they represented relief. food for the colder months had been stored. The hardest work was nearly complete. Now there was finally time to celebrate together. Winter, too, had its own quiet charm. Although snow and freezing winds kept most people indoors, feast days during the colder months filled cottages and great halls alike with warmth. Candles glowed softly against timber walls, fireplaces crackled gently, and neighbors gathered to share stories that had been told for generations. Music echoed through rooms scented with wood smoke and fresh bread. Outside, frost covered the sleeping countryside. Inside, laughter warmed the evening. Whether in spring sunshine or winter candlelight, festivals reminded medieval people of something wonderfully simple. Life was meant to be shared. Friendships deepened. Families reunited. Neighbors strengthened old bonds. And occasionally, almost without anyone noticing at first, two people discovered they looked forward to seeing one another just a little more than before. There were no grand declarations. No dramatic proposals beneath balconies. No orchestras waiting to play at precisely the right moment. Instead, affection grew quietly through familiar conversations, shared dances, kind gestures, and evenings spent beneath the same peaceful sky. As darkness gently settles over the village once more, the music gradually fades into silence. The last lanterns flicker outside cottage doors, families say their good nights, and tired villagers make their way home beneath a blanket of countless stars. Our walk through these joyful festivals comes to an end. We'll discover how medieval people expressed affection when words alone weren't enough, from shy smiles and lingering glances to handmade gifts, ribbons, flowers, and the gentle art of courtship that unfolded one small gesture at a time. The quiet language of medieval flirting. Smiles, glances, and unspoken feelings. The music from the village festival has long since faded into the night. As our journey continues, a peaceful silence settles over the countryside once more. The stars slowly disappear, and another gentle dawn begins to brighten the eastern sky. A light mist drifts across the fields, birds greet the morning from the hedgerows, and the village awakens with the same comforting rhythm it has followed for generations. After spending time at churches, markets, and seasonal festivals, our young villagers have become familiar faces to one another. Friendships have deepened, conversations have become easier, and perhaps a few hearts have begun to beat just a little faster. But this brings us to an interesting question. If medieval people rarely spoke openly about romance in the beginning, how did they let someone know they were interested? The answer is both simple and surprisingly familiar. Most flirting was wonderfully quiet. Forget the grand movie scenes where someone bursts into song beneath a balcony or delivers a passionate speech before a cheering crowd. For ordinary medieval villagers, affection usually revealed itself through the smallest gestures so subtle that an outsider might not even notice them. It often began with nothing more than a glance. Imagine standing in the busy village marketplace on a warm spring morning. Farmers arrange baskets of vegetables, children weave between the stalls, and merchants call out friendly greetings to passing customers. Across the square, someone catches your eye. Perhaps you've seen them many times before. Perhaps you've spoken only a handful of times. For just a moment, your eyes meet. They smile. You smile back. Then both of you quietly return to your work. By modern standards, it may seem like almost nothing happened. Yet in a close-knit medieval village, those brief moments could linger in someone's thoughts for days. There were no endless streams of photographs to scroll through later. No messages arriving late at night. No profiles revealing favorite hobbies or carefully chosen pictures. Instead, memories were built from real encounters. The sound of someone's laughter. The kindness in their voice. The warmth of their smile. The patience they showed while helping an elderly neighbor. these ordinary details mattered far more than dramatic first impressions. Kindness itself was often considered attractive. A young man who quietly helped repair a widow's fence after a storm earned respect throughout the community. A young woman who comforted frightened children during a difficult winter was admired not because she sought attention, but because compassion was deeply valued. People noticed character long before they spoke of love. And because everyone lived so closely together, true character was difficult to hide. Someone pretending to be generous for a single afternoon would soon be discovered. Real kindness revealed itself over months and years. That made it trustworthy. Conversations, too, unfolded slowly. There was no expectation of impressing someone within a few minutes. Instead, people met again and again. At church. At the mill. During harvest. At festivals. While drawing water from the village well. Each meeting added another small thread to the growing fabric of friendship. Sometimes those conversations were wonderfully ordinary. The weather. The coming harvest. A neighbor's new calf. Whether the coming winter might be especially cold. To us, these subjects might sound rather unromantic. Yet relationships often grow strongest through everyday conversation rather than extraordinary speeches. Medieval villagers understood this naturally. Listening carefully was considered a sign of respect. Interrupting constantly or boasting about oneself rarely earned admiration. Someone known for speaking honestly, showing patience, and treating others with courtesy developed a reputation that quietly spread throughout the village. In many ways, reputation became a silent introduction. Long before two people truly knew one another, they often knew what others thought of them. He's hardworking. She's always willing to help. They're honest people. These simple descriptions carried remarkable weight. Another gentle form of flirting involved finding reasons to be nearby. If several young villagers walked together after Sunday church, perhaps one person consistently chose the same path home. If families worked neighboring fields during harvest, someone might happily volunteer for that section year after year. Nothing seemed unusual. After all, everyone was simply helping where they were needed. Yet sometimes the heart has its own quiet reasons. Of course, none of this guaranteed romance. Many friendships remained exactly that, friendships. Not every smile carried hidden meaning. Not every shared conversation led to marriage. And that was perfectly ordinary. Life itself unfolded without hurry. Patience shaped nearly every part of medieval courtship. As the morning grows warmer, our little village settles into another peaceful day. The blacksmith's hammer rings steadily in the distance, geese wander lazily beside the pond, and children chase one another across the green exactly as they have done for generations. Somewhere nearby, two familiar faces exchange another quiet smile. Perhaps neither fully understands what those small moments may one day become. Or perhaps they already do. Either way, there is no need to rush. In the Middle Ages, love often began not with dramatic declarations, but with simple kindness, familiar conversations, and the comforting joy of seeing the same welcoming face again and again. We'll discover how flowers, ribbons, handmade gifts, music, and little acts of thoughtfulness became the gentle language of affection in a world where actions often spoke far louder than words. Flowers, songs, and small gifts. The morning has gently slipped into afternoon, and the village seems almost drowsy beneath the warmth of the summer sun. Bees wander lazily between wildflowers growing beside the winding paths, while a soft breeze ripples through fields of barley like gentle waves upon a quiet sea. Somewhere beyond the cottages, the cheerful melody of a shepherd's flute drifts through the countryside, rising and falling with the wind. Our peaceful walk continues. In the last part of our journey, we discovered that a simple smile or a kind conversation could speak volumes in a medieval village. But there were times when people wished to express their feelings a little more clearly. Not with expensive jewelry. Not with bouquets ordered online. And certainly not with a carefully planned candlelit dinner. Instead, affection was often shown through the simplest gifts imaginable. For most ordinary villagers, wealth was limited. Every loaf of bread required hours of work. Every piece of cloth represented weeks of spinning and weaving. Every wooden tool had been shaped by skilled hands. Because life demanded so much effort, even the smallest gift carried genuine meaning. Imagine a young man walking home after helping with the harvest. Along the edge of the path, he notices a patch of bright blue cornflowers swaying gently in the breeze. He pauses for a moment. Carefully, he gathers a few blossoms, tying them together with a thin strip of linen thread. The flowers are not rare. They cost nothing. Within a few days they will fade. Yet when offered sincerely, they quietly say something words often cannot. I was thinking of you. Wildflowers were among nature's simplest treasures. In spring and summer, the countryside was filled with daisies, poppies, violets, buttercups, and countless other blooms. Young people sometimes exchanged these flowers during festivals or after long walks through the fields. Of course, medieval people did not always attach the elaborate symbolic meanings to flowers that became popular centuries later. Most simply appreciated their beauty and the thought behind the gift. Sometimes affection was shown through craftsmanship instead. A shepherd skilled with a pocket knife might carve a tiny wooden bird during quiet evenings beside the fire. A blacksmith's apprentice could carefully shape a small iron brooch. A young woman might embroider a colorful ribbon onto a linen pouch or weave a narrow woolen band using thread she had dyed herself with berries and plants gathered from the countryside. These gifts were rarely extravagant. They were valuable because they represented something far more precious than money. Time. Every carved figure, every embroidered stitch, every woven ribbon required patience. Giving such a gift quietly said, I chose to spend my time creating something for you. That message has never really grown old. Music also played a gentle role in medieval courtship. Most villages had no professional orchestras, but music was woven into everyday life. Shepherds played simple flutes while watching their flocks. Traveling musicians occasionally visited fairs and feast days, carrying fiddles, harps, bagpipes, or small drums from village to village. Songs filled the air during festivals, weddings, and long evenings after harvest. Some were lively dance tunes. Others were gentle ballads telling stories of faithful love, distant journeys, brave heroes, or happy endings that listeners never seemed to tire of hearing. Young people often learned these songs simply by listening to older generations sing them year after year. Perhaps during a festival dance, someone quietly joined in singing a familiar melody. Across the circle, another voice joined the chorus. For a few peaceful moments, dozens of villagers sang together beneath a sky slowly filling with stars. There is something wonderfully comforting about shared music. It brings people together without demanding anything in return. Even today, hearing an old song can awaken memories long forgotten. The same was true centuries ago. Of course, not every act of affection involved gifts or music. Sometimes kindness itself remained the greatest gift. Imagine a rainy autumn afternoon. The path leading home has become muddy after hours of steady rain. An elderly woman struggles to carry a heavy basket filled with vegetables from the market. Before she can ask for help, a nearby young man quietly lifts the basket onto his shoulder and walks beside her all the way to her cottage. A young woman notices a neighbor's family has fallen ill during winter. Without making a fuss, she bakes an extra loaf of bread and leaves it at their doorstep. No one expects praise. No one announces these good deeds to the entire village. Yet people notice. Kindness has a quiet way of becoming known. and someone observing these acts might begin to see another person in a new light. This was one of the most powerful forms of attraction in medieval communities. Not clever words, not dramatic displays, simply dependable goodness. As evening approaches, the village prepares once again for rest. Children chase one another one final time across the green before their parents call them home. The last rays of sunlight bathe the cottages in warm golden light, while smoke curls gently into the cooling air. A shepherd returns with his flock. The blacksmith closes the heavy wooden doors of his workshop. Candles begin to glow softly behind small windows. Somewhere, a young woman carefully places a tiny carved wooden bird upon a shelf beside her bed. Elsewhere, a young man smiles quietly as he notices a faded ribbon still tied around the handle of his satchel, a simple gift received many weeks before. Neither gift is expensive. Neither would impress a king. Yet both carry memories that cannot be measured by wealth. Perhaps that is one of the loveliest lessons medieval courtship has to offer. The smallest gestures often leave the deepest impressions. A flower gathered during a summer walk. A ribbon patiently woven by hand. A song shared beneath the evening sky. A quiet act of kindness when no one else was watching. These were the gentle threads from which many medieval love stories were woven. As darkness settles peacefully over our little village once more, we leave behind the language of smiles and handmade gifts. I will step inside the homes of medieval families to discover why love was rarely a matter for two people alone, and how parents, relatives, and the entire community often played a quiet but important role in deciding whether a courtship would blossom into marriage. Courtship and family approval. When love became a family matter. The last candle from yesterday evening has long since burned out. A cool breeze sweeps gently across the sleeping village as the first hint of dawn appears above the distant hills. The sky slowly changes from deep blue to soft shades of pink and gold, while birds begin their cheerful morning songs from the branches of ancient oak trees. Before long, cottage doors creak open one by one, and another peaceful day begins, much like the thousands that came before it. Our quiet walk through the Middle Ages continues. So far, we've watched friendships grow from childhood, wandered through lively markets and cheerful festivals, and discovered how simple smiles, thoughtful gifts, and quiet acts of kindness could slowly bring two people closer together. But eventually, there came a moment when two young people realized they wished to spend more time together. And in the medieval world, that decision rarely belonged to them alone. Today, many people think of dating as something deeply personal. Two individuals decide whether they enjoy each other's company, and if the relationship grows, they choose together where it might lead. For most ordinary medieval villagers, however, love was never entirely private. Families were closely connected, not only by affection but by survival itself. A household was much more than a place to sleep. It was a working partnership. Every pair of hands mattered. A son helped plough the fields. A daughter baked bread, spun wool, cared for animals, or helped raise younger children. Parents naturally wondered what would happen when one of their children eventually married and joined another household. Would they move away? Would another family gain a hard-working son or daughter? Would both families continue helping one another during harvests, difficult winters, or times of illness? Marriage shaped the future of entire households. So when a young man began showing interest in someone, his parents often noticed long before he imagined they had. Perhaps his mother smiled knowingly when he volunteered to fetch flour from the neighboring mill for the third week in a row. Perhaps his father quietly raised an eyebrow when Sunday walks home from church suddenly became much longer than usual. Parents had once been young themselves. Very little escaped their attention. The same was true for young women. A mother might notice that her daughter took a little more care braiding her hair before attending the village festival. An older sister might tease her gently after spotting a familiar face waiting near the church gate. These moments were usually filled with warmth rather than strict disapproval. In a close-knit village, everyone expected that young people would eventually marry. The question was simply when and to whom. When feelings appeared genuine, families often welcomed opportunities to know one another better. Fortunately, this was rarely difficult. Most parents had already known each other for years. Perhaps they had worked side by side during countless harvests. Perhaps they attended the same church every Sunday. Perhaps they had grown up together themselves. This familiarity created a foundation of trust. Unlike meeting complete strangers, many medieval courtships developed between families who already understood each other's character. That did not mean every family approved immediately. Practical questions naturally arose. Was the young man hard-working? Did the young woman manage household responsibilities well? Were both families honest and respected within the community? Could the couple build a stable future together? These questions might sound unromantic to modern ears, but they reflected everyday reality. Life in the Middle Ages was often uncertain. Harvests could fail. Winters could be harsh. Illness could arrive without warning. Choosing a dependable partner was not simply a matter of the heart. It was also a matter of building a life capable of weathering difficult seasons together. Fortunately, kindness remained one of the greatest recommendations anyone could receive. A young person known for generosity, patience, honesty, and steady work earned admiration throughout the village. Such qualities could not easily be faked. Years of everyday life had already revealed who someone truly was. Courtship itself unfolded slowly. There were opportunities to talk during family visits, after church, while walking home from village gatherings, or while working together during harvest. Rarely were two young people completely alone. Someone's younger brother might wander nearby chasing butterflies. A grandmother could be knitting beneath the shade of a tree. Parents might be only a short distance away gathering vegetables or stacking bundles of grain. To modern listeners, this may seem rather unusual. Yet for medieval villagers, it simply felt normal. Privacy was limited. Community was constant. Strangely enough, this often removed much of the uncertainty. Because families already knew one another, relationships usually developed openly rather than in secret. If affection continued to grow, neighbors quietly began to notice. Nothing spread through a medieval village faster than happy news. An elderly woman at the well might smile as two familiar young people happened to arrive at nearly the same moment. The village baker might quietly remark that they always seemed to attend the same festivals. No one needed to announce anything. The entire community observed life unfolding together. As the afternoon sun begins its slow journey toward the western hills, our peaceful stroll reaches another quiet pause. The fields shimmer beneath the golden light. Children laugh beside the stream. A gentle breeze rustles through the barley, carrying with it the comforting sounds of another ordinary day. Love, we are beginning to discover, was never simply about two hearts. It was also about families, friendships, trust, and a community that quietly hoped to see its young people build happy, lasting homes together. And we'll discover how those growing relationships slowly became formal courtships, how promises were made, and why patience remained one of the most admired qualities of medieval romance. Promises made one gentle day at a time. The warm afternoon slowly gives way to evening. Long shadows stretch across the fields as the sun sinks toward the distant hills, painting the sky in soft shades of amber, rose, and pale lavender. Swallows dart through the cooling air, and the steady hum of the village gradually begins to quiet. Farmers lead their horses back to the stables, children answer the familiar calls of their parents, and smoke curls peacefully from dozens of stone chimneys. As our evening walk continues, we've reached a new chapter in the lives of our young villagers. The smiles exchanged after church, the conversations at market, the dances beneath summer skies, and the thoughtful gifts of flowers and ribbons have slowly grown into something deeper. Now comes the question everyone has quietly been wondering. What happened next? For most medieval couples, there was rarely a dramatic moment when one person suddenly declared their love in front of the entire village. Courtship was usually a slow and gentle process, unfolding over many months and sometimes even years. There was no rush. In fact, patience was often considered a sign of sincerity. If a young man truly hoped to build a future with someone, he continued doing exactly what had first earned her family's respect. He worked diligently in the fields, treated neighbors with kindness, honored his parents, and kept his promises. Grand speeches meant very little if they were not supported by everyday actions. The same was true for a young woman. She continued helping her family, managing household responsibilities, caring for younger siblings, spinning wool, baking bread, or tending the garden. Her character was revealed not through a single remarkable day but through countless ordinary ones. In many ways, medieval courtship was less about impressing someone and more about proving that you could be depended upon. Dependability was one of the greatest compliments a person could receive. Imagine two families visiting one another on a pleasant summer afternoon. The younger children play together beneath an apple tree while the older generation sit on simple wooden benches outside the cottage. Fresh bread, soft cheese, and mugs of cool cider are placed upon the table. Conversation flows easily because these families have known each other for years. They speak of the weather, the coming harvest, a neighbor repairing his barn, the health of an elderly aunt. And somewhere within these ordinary conversations, everyone quietly understands that something more important is slowly taking shape. The young couple spend time together, though never far from the rest of the family. They may stroll a short distance through the garden while younger brothers chase butterflies nearby, or help gather vegetables from the fields together. These simple moments allow them to continue learning about one another without ever feeling hurried. There is a comforting simplicity to it all. No one is trying to create the perfect date. There are no reservations to make, no expensive gifts to buy, and no pressure to entertain. Life itself provides the opportunity to know another person. How do they respond when plans change because of rain? Are they patient with tired grandparents? Do they laugh easily? Do they remain calm when work becomes difficult? These everyday moments reveal far more than grand romantic gestures ever could. As the months pass, trust continues to grow not only between the couple, but between both families as well. Parents begin to feel confident that their son or daughter will be cared for. Neighbors notice that the young pair continue to show one another kindness and respect. The village priest may even quietly observe their growing affection during Sunday gatherings. Eventually, conversations become a little more serious. Although customs varied from one region to another, many couples reached an understanding that they hoped to marry when the time was right. This promise was not always marked by an elaborate ceremony. Sometimes it was simply known among the families. Sometimes blessings were offered privately. Sometimes small gifts were exchanged as symbols of their commitment. A simple ring, a carefully woven belt, a beautifully embroidered handkerchief, or another handmade token created with loving care. Unlike modern engagement rings that often sparkle with precious gemstones, these gifts were valued less for their cost and more for the meaning they carried. They represented trust, hope, and the beginning of a shared future. Of course, life did not always unfold exactly as planned. Poor harvests could delay weddings. Unexpected illness might force families to wait another season. Occasionally, a young man left the village for months to complete an apprenticeship or earn enough to establish his own household before marrying. patience remained essential. Waiting was simply another part of life. Perhaps this is one of the greatest differences between medieval courtship and modern dating. Today, we often expect answers quickly. Messages arrive instantly. Plans can be made within minutes. But centuries ago, life moved at the pace of the seasons. Spring followed winter. Harvest followed summer. And meaningful relationships were allowed to grow just as naturally. As twilight settles over the countryside, the village becomes wonderfully peaceful once again. The last rays of sunlight disappear behind the hills, leaving only the soft glow of candles shining through tiny cottage windows. Somewhere nearby, an owl calls from the edge of the forest, while the gentle crackle of fireplaces fills the evening with warmth and comfort. Inside one humble cottage, two families share one final cup of warm cider before saying goodnight. No grand announcement has been made. No dramatic proposal has taken place. Yet everyone leaves with quiet smiles, carrying the comforting feeling that two good people may one day build a happy home together. And perhaps that gentle certainty is more beautiful than any dramatic declaration. As we leave these peaceful homes behind, our journey continues toward a very different world. We'll climb the winding paths to towering stone castles and discover how romance unfolded among medieval nobles, where poetry, tournaments, elegant manners, and the ideals of courtly love created a style of courtship quite unlike the quiet village life we've come to know. Romance among the nobility. Life behind the castle walls. As darkness slowly gives way to dawn, let us leave our quiet farming village behind. The familiar cottages disappear into the morning mist, and our path begins to climb gently toward the hills. Birds circle high above the treetops, while the first golden light catches the tops of distant stone towers. Before long, a magnificent castle rises from the landscape, its tall walls glowing softly in the early sunlight. The air feels different here. Instead of the gentle sounds of grazing sheep and creaking farm carts, we hear the footsteps of guards changing their watch, the clatter of horses crossing a wooden drawbridge, and the fluttering banners that dance in the cool morning breeze. Welcome to the world of medieval nobility. Although stories often make castles seem like places filled with endless romance, dazzling feasts, and noble knights rescuing beautiful ladies, everyday life inside these great stone walls was far more complicated and often much quieter. Still, romance among the nobility followed its own unique traditions, shaped by duty, honor, and family expectations. As we cross the drawbridge together, notice the bustling courtyard below. Servants hurry between kitchens and workshops carrying baskets of bread, bundles of firewood, and buckets of fresh water. Stable boys brush horses while blacksmiths sharpen swords and repair armor. Noble children practice reading with tutors or learn the manners expected at court. Despite the grandeur of the castle, life begins early here, just as it does in the village. The lord and lady of the castle carry many responsibilities. They oversee the estate, settle disagreements among tenants, welcome important visitors, and ensure enough food is stored for the coming seasons. Their sons and daughters are raised with equally careful attention. From a young age, noble boys begin learning horsemanship, swordsmanship, hunting, and the customs of court. They are expected to become capable leaders one day, responsible not only for their own households but for many people living on their families' lands. Noble girls receive an education of a different kind. They learn reading and writing more often than ordinary villagers, especially in wealthy households. They practice embroidery, music, household management, languages, and the graceful manners expected in noble society. Many also become highly skilled at organizing large households, welcoming honored guests, and overseeing servants. Both boys and girls understand from an early age that their futures will be influenced not only by personal feelings but also by family responsibilities. Unlike the small village where nearly everyone knew one another, castles welcomed a constant flow of visitors. traveling knights, messengers, merchants, visiting nobles, priests, musicians, diplomats. The great hall often became the center of castle life, especially during feasts. Long wooden tables stretched across the room beneath towering beams blackened by years of smoke from enormous fireplaces. Candles flickered against colorful tapestries hanging on the walls, while musicians quietly played harps, flutes, or lutes during the evening meal. For young nobles, these gatherings provided rare opportunities to meet people beyond their own household. Perhaps the daughter of a neighboring lord arrived with her family for a harvest feast. Perhaps the son of another noble house visited while accompanying his father on important business. Conversations began politely. Guests spoke about their journeys, the weather, hunting, books, or news from distant regions. Everything unfolded according to careful etiquette. Good manners were highly valued. Speaking respectfully, listening patiently, showing generosity toward guests. These qualities reflected not only personal character but the honor of one's entire family. As friendships developed, another idea slowly emerged, one that became famous throughout medieval Europe. It was called courtly love. Now, despite its romantic name, courtly love was often quite different from ordinary village courtship. Rather than growing naturally from years of shared work and childhood friendship, courtly love became an ideal celebrated in poetry, songs, and stories. A noble knight might admire a lady from afar, praising her kindness, wisdom, beauty, and grace through carefully composed poems. He might dedicate victories in tournaments to her honor or wear a ribbon she had given him as a symbol of respect and encouragement. These gestures were often highly symbolic. They reflected admiration, loyalty, courtesy, and refined behavior rather than everyday romance as we understand it today. Many medieval poets delighted in writing about these noble ideals. They described love as something that inspired courage, patience, generosity, and honorable conduct. Whether these poems reflected everyday reality is another question entirely. Like many popular stories today, they presented an idealized version of life, beautiful, inspiring, and sometimes a little removed from ordinary experience. Still, they shaped how many nobles thought about romance. As the morning sun climbs higher above the castle walls, we wander through peaceful gardens where roses bloom beside stone paths. Noble ladies stroll slowly beneath shaded arches while falcons perch quietly on wooden stands nearby. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of laughter drifts from the training yard, where young squires practice beneath the watchful eyes of experienced knights. The castle may seem grander than our little village, but beneath the fine clothing and impressive halls, its young people share something surprisingly familiar. They hope to be admired for their character. They enjoy meaningful conversation. They treasure kindness. And, like everyone else, they quietly wonder what the future may hold. As our walk through the castle gardens comes to a gentle pause, another chapter of noble romance awaits. We'll witness colorful tournaments, graceful dances, elegant gifts, and discover why, even among kings and queens, love often had to share its place with duty, politics, and family expectations. Tournaments, poetry, and promises. The gentle morning has slowly unfolded into a bright and pleasant afternoon. Sunlight warms the pale stone walls of the castle, while colorful banners ripple lazily in the breeze. From somewhere beyond the outer gate comes the cheerful sound of trumpets, followed by the excited murmur of a growing crowd. Today is no ordinary day. A tournament has come to the castle. As we make our way through the busy courtyard, servants hurry past carrying wooden benches and baskets filled with fresh bread. Merchants arrange ribbons, gloves, and finely crafted trinkets upon small stalls, hoping visitors might take home a keepsake of the celebration. Children weave excitedly through the gathering crowd, pretending to be brave knights with wooden swords no bigger than their arms. Elderly guests find comfortable places beneath shaded awnings, while noble families take their seats upon raised platforms overlooking the tournament field. Although modern films often portray tournaments as fierce and constant battles, many were festive occasions as much as military contests. They brought together nobles from neighboring lands, creating opportunities not only to demonstrate skill but also to renew friendships, discuss alliances, and celebrate together. For young nobles, tournaments also offered something else: a chance to be noticed. Across the field, a line of armored knights sits proudly upon magnificent horses. Their polished helmets catch the sunlight, making them shimmer like silver. Brightly painted shields display family symbols: lions, eagles, crosses, and flowering vines, each representing generations of noble history. Before the contests begin, some knights receive small tokens from ladies watching from the gallery. Perhaps a silk ribbon, a finely embroidered sleeve, or a beautifully woven scarf. These gifts were not magical charms, nor were they promises of marriage. Instead, they were symbols of encouragement and respect. A knight might tie the ribbon to his lance or fasten it to his armor as a reminder to conduct himself with honor throughout the day's events. Whether he won or lost mattered less than how he behaved. Courage without kindness earned little admiration. Skill without humility was rarely celebrated for long. The finest knights were expected to show courtesy even toward their opponents. As the trumpet sounds, horses thunder across the field in carefully organized jousts. Lances splinter dramatically against shields, drawing cheers from the spectators. Yet between each contest, musicians play gentle melodies while servants carry refreshments through the crowd. The atmosphere is surprisingly cheerful. Families laugh together. Children imitate the riders using sticks for lances. Neighbors greet friends they haven't seen for months. In many ways, the tournament feels as much like a grand festival as a competition. For young noblemen and women, these gatherings offered valuable opportunities to spend time together under the watchful eyes of their families. Conversations unfolded during meals served in the great hall afterward. Guests admired one another's gardens. They discussed falconry, music, books, hunting, or stories brought by travelers from distant kingdoms. Unlike the quiet village romances we explored earlier, noble courtship often required careful manners at every step. Every greeting, every conversation, every dance, everything reflected upon the reputation of one's family. As evening approaches, the excitement of the tournament gives way to a magnificent feast. The great hall glows with hundreds of flickering candles. Long wooden tables overflow with roasted meats, fresh bread, fruit, cheeses, pies, and sweet pastries flavored with precious spices brought from faraway lands. Harpists and lute players fill the hall with gentle music while guests enjoy leisurely conversation. Soon the tables are cleared to make room for dancing. Unlike the lively circle dances of the village festivals, these dances are slower and more formal. Couples move gracefully across the polished floor, bowing politely before each dance begins and thanking one another afterward. No one rushes. Everything follows a calm, elegant rhythm. It is during evenings like these that many noble friendships quietly deepen. Perhaps two young nobles discover they both enjoy reading the same stories. Perhaps they laugh together over a falcon refusing to obey its trainer earlier that afternoon. Or perhaps they simply enjoy each other's company while strolling through the castle gardens beneath a sky filled with stars. Yet beneath all this elegance lies an important truth. For many noble families, marriage was about far more than personal happiness. A marriage could strengthen alliances between powerful houses. It could unite neighboring lands. It could bring peace after years of disagreement or secure valuable estates for future generations. This did not mean love was impossible. many noble couples undoubtedly grew to care deeply for one another. But family duty often stood beside romance, guiding important decisions. Young nobles understood this from childhood. Their parents hoped they would marry wisely as well as happily. To modern listeners, this balance between affection and responsibility may seem unfamiliar. Yet for medieval nobles, it was simply part of life. As the feast slowly comes to an end, guests step outside onto the castle terrace. The cool evening air carries the sweet fragrance of roses from the gardens below. Above them stretches a brilliant sky scattered with countless stars, just as it did above the humble village where our journey first began. The castle may be grander. Its halls may be richer. Its traditions more elaborate. But beneath the fine clothing and noble titles, the hopes of its young people are remarkably similar to those of the villagers. To be respected. To find companionship. To build a peaceful future. And perhaps, if fortune is kind, to share that future with someone whose presence makes even an ordinary day feel a little brighter. As the castle grows quiet and the last candles begin to flicker low, we leave the world of knights and noble ladies behind. We'll return to the quieter rhythms of everyday medieval life to explore how a simple courtship gradually became an engagement, and the gentle traditions that marked the beginning of a lifelong promise. Engagement traditions. When two families agreed. The castle slowly disappears behind us as our path winds back through peaceful forests and open meadows. Dawn has arrived once again, and a cool blanket of mist rests gently upon the fields. Dew sparkles on blades of grass, birds greet the morning with cheerful songs, and the familiar outline of our little medieval village comes into view. Thin trails of smoke rise from cottage chimneys, just as they have every morning throughout our journey. It feels comforting to be back. Over the past few chapters, we've watched friendships blossom into quiet affection, seen families gradually approve of growing relationships, and even spent time among the castles and courts of medieval nobles. But eventually, whether someone lived in a humble village or behind towering stone walls, there came a moment when courtship began to turn into something more permanent. A promise. Not yet a wedding, but the beginning of one. Today, many people think of an engagement as a carefully planned proposal, often with a sparkling ring hidden in a small velvet box. In the Middle Ages, things were usually much simpler. Customs varied greatly across Europe, depending on the region, local traditions, and social class. There was no single engagement ceremony shared by every village or kingdom. Even so, one idea appeared again and again. Marriage was not simply the joining of two people. It was also the joining of two families. Imagine a pleasant spring afternoon. The apple trees surrounding the village are covered in delicate white blossoms, and the air is filled with the gentle buzzing of bees. Outside one modest timber cottage, two families gather around a sturdy wooden table placed beneath the shade of an old oak tree. Fresh bread has just been baked. A wheel of cheese rests beside bowls of early strawberries. Clay cups are filled with cool cider drawn that very morning. The atmosphere is relaxed. There is laughter. Children chase one another through the grass while grandparents smile quietly from nearby benches. At first glance, it seems like an ordinary family visit. But everyone understands that today's gathering carries special meaning. The young couple sit together, speaking softly while their parents enjoy easy conversation. They have known one another for years, perhaps since childhood, and so have their families. Nothing feels hurried. There are no photographers arranging perfect poses. No carefully rehearsed speeches. No dramatic surprises. Instead, the conversation unfolds naturally. The fathers discuss the coming harvest. The mothers exchange recipes and stories about village life. Neighbors stop by to offer cheerful greetings before continuing on their way. Eventually, attention gently turns toward the young couple. questions are asked with kindness rather than pressure. Have they truly considered the responsibilities of marriage? Do they understand that building a household requires patience, cooperation, and hard work? Are they prepared to support one another through difficult seasons as well as joyful ones? These conversations may sound practical, but they reflected the realities of medieval life. Marriage was expected to last a lifetime. It meant sharing not only happiness but every challenge that lay ahead. If illness came, they would face it together. If harvests failed, they would face that together too. If children arrived, they would raise them side by side. Love was important. But so was partnership. When both families felt confident, some form of understanding was reached. In many places, this agreement was spoken aloud before relatives and trusted friends. In others, it was marked by a blessing from the local priest. Sometimes hands were joined as a simple symbol that two lives would soon become one. This gentle joining of hands eventually became known in many regions as handfasting, although the exact customs differed from place to place and changed over the centuries. Unlike the romantic legends that often surround it today, handfasting was not always mysterious or elaborate. More often, it was simply a public promise witnessed by the community. Its purpose was wonderfully straightforward. Everyone understood that these two people intended to marry. Trust was built through openness. There was comfort in knowing that families stood behind the couple, ready to help them build their future. Sometimes a small gift accompanied the promise. Perhaps a plain iron or silver ring. Perhaps a beautifully woven belt. Perhaps a finely embroidered cloth made by loving hands over many evenings beside the fire. For wealthier families, gifts might be more valuable. For ordinary villagers, even the simplest token carried deep meaning. The object itself mattered less than what it represented. Commitment. Faithfulness. Hope. As the afternoon sun warms the village green, neighbors continue their daily work. A blacksmith pauses to wave cheerfully toward the gathering. Children laugh while chasing butterflies between the cottages. Somewhere nearby, the village baker removes fragrant loaves from the oven, filling the air with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. Life continues almost exactly as it did yesterday. And yet, for one young couple, everything has quietly changed. No wedding has taken place. No great feast has begun. But the path ahead is now becoming clearer. Two families have placed their trust in one another. Two young hearts have made a gentle promise. And the peaceful rhythm of medieval life moves steadily forward, one ordinary day at a time. As the evening breeze begins to cool the fields and the shadows lengthen beneath the old oak trees, our journey reaches another gentle pause. We'll discover how villages prepared for the wedding itself, from sewing new clothes and baking bread to decorating cottages, inviting neighbors, and filling the countryside with joyful anticipation for one of the happiest celebrations of the medieval year. Preparing for the wedding. The soft glow of sunset gradually fades behind the western hills, and another peaceful night settles over our little medieval village. One by one, candles are lit behind tiny cottage windows, their warm light flickering gently through the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls from the edge of the forest, while the last few villagers finish their evening chores before heading home. As the stars slowly wheel across the quiet sky, time passes almost unnoticed. Days become weeks. Weeks gently become months. And before long, the first signs of another season begin to appear. When dawn arrives once again, the village feels different. Fresh green leaves cover the hedgerows, birds sing from nearly every tree, and colorful wildflowers bloom beside the narrow country lanes. Spring has returned, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings. For one young couple, that promise now has a date. The wedding is drawing near. Unlike the hurried pace of many modern celebrations, preparing for a medieval wedding was rarely a matter of ordering decorations or sending invitations in a single afternoon. Nearly everything had to be made by hand, and the entire community often played a part in the preparations. There was a comforting rhythm to it all. The bride's family might begin weaving or sewing the finest clothing they could manage. For wealthy nobles, this could mean beautifully dyed fabrics trimmed with fur, silk, or delicate embroidery. But for ordinary villagers, elegance looked much simpler. A freshly woven linen dress, a clean woolen cloak, perhaps a colorful ribbon braided into the hair. The clothing did not need to be extravagant. It needed to be well cared for. Clean, respectfully made, prepared with love. The groom also took special care with his appearance. His everyday work clothes, stained from fields or workshops, were carefully washed and mended. Boots were polished as well as possible, belts repaired, and perhaps a new wool tunic was sewn if the family could afford the cloth. No one expected perfection, only effort. Meanwhile, the entire village quietly began preparing for the celebration. The baker planned to make extra loaves of bread. The brewer worked to ensure enough ale would be ready. The butcher prepared meat for the feast. Neighbors offered vegetables, eggs, fresh herbs, butter, or wheels of cheese from their own homes. Unlike many modern weddings, where much of the work can be hired out, medieval celebrations often became community projects. Helping one another simply felt natural. If someone had little money, they might contribute firewood for the cooking fires. Another neighbor offered benches for extra guests. Someone else decorated the tables with bundles of fresh flowers gathered from nearby meadows. Everyone gave what they could. That spirit of cooperation made the celebration feel as though it belonged to the entire village, not only to one family. As preparations continued, excitement quietly spread. Children whispered to one another about the coming feast. Older women discussed recipes they had prepared for countless weddings before. The village musician tuned his fiddle, hoping the weather would remain fair enough for dancing outdoors. Even the blacksmith smiled as he watched the young groom pass by, offering a warm congratulations before returning to his work. Although medieval life could often be difficult, weddings offered something everyone looked forward to. A reason to celebrate together. Not every day brought joyful news. Harvests sometimes failed. Illness visited without warning. Long winters tested everyone's patience. But a wedding reminded people that life also held moments of hope. New households would be formed. New children might one day be born. The village itself would continue growing, generation after generation. In many regions, neighbors arrived a day or two before the ceremony to lend helping hands. Tables were carried into the village green. Large cooking pots were placed above open fires. Fresh rushes or fragrant herbs might be scattered across the floor of the cottage or hall to make everything feel cleaner and more welcoming. Simple decorations appeared wherever flowers were in bloom. Nothing needed to be lavish. Nature itself provided much of the beauty. Imagine walking through the village on the evening before the wedding. The air smells of fresh bread cooling upon wooden shelves. Someone nearby is roasting meat over glowing coals. Children laugh as they chase one another between stacks of firewood. Young women finish the last stitches on a beautifully embroidered sleeve while older relatives quietly inspect every detail, making sure everything is ready. The groom helps friends arrange benches beneath the shade of an ancient oak tree. The bride spends quiet time with her family, perhaps feeling excited, perhaps a little nervous, but surrounded by the familiar faces she has known her entire life. There is no frantic rushing. No endless checklists. Only the comforting feeling that tomorrow will be a very special day. As evening falls, the village slowly grows quiet once more. The stars emerge one by one above the sleeping countryside. The cooking fires burn low. The last conversations fade into gentle whispers. Somewhere inside a small cottage, two families say goodnight, knowing that when the morning sun rises, everything will be just a little different. A new chapter in two lives is about to begin. And as we leave the peaceful village beneath its blanket of stars, our own journey moves gently forward. We'll wake to the joyful sounds of church bells ringing across the countryside as friends, families, and neighbors gather for one of the happiest days in medieval life, the wedding itself, followed by music,
dancing, laughter, and a celebration that often lasted long after the sun had set.
The wedding day. Church bells and wedding vows. The night passes quietly, and just before sunrise, a pale silver mist settles once more across the field surrounding our little medieval village. The world seems to hold its breath for a few peaceful moments. Then, as the first golden rays of morning peak above the eastern hills, the village slowly awakens. Birds burst into cheerful song, smoke rises from cottage chimneys, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell rings through the crisp morning air. Today is different. The familiar rhythm of work has paused. No one is hurrying to the fields with a plough or leading sheep toward the pastures. Instead, neighbors step outside wearing their finest clothes, greeting one another with warm smiles as they make their way toward the small stone church standing proudly at the heart of the village. Our quiet walk has brought us to one of the happiest mornings in medieval life. A wedding day. For most medieval people, marriage was far more than a celebration between two individuals. It was a sacred promise, witnessed not only by family and friends but also by the entire community. Long before the ceremony began, the church itself had already become a peaceful gathering place. Its weathered stone walls had stood for generations. Tiny wildflowers bloomed between the cracks of the old pathway leading to its wooden doors. Inside, rows of simple wooden benches faced the altar, where candles flickered softly in the gentle morning light filtering through colorful stained glass windows. The air carried the comforting scent of beeswax and incense. Outside, villagers arrived in small groups. Children, usually so full of restless energy, did their best to remain quiet at least for a little while. Older neighbors exchanged cheerful greetings. Someone admired the fresh flowers decorating the church entrance. Another commented on what beautiful weather the village had been blessed with. The atmosphere felt calm, hopeful, full of quiet anticipation. The bride's family arrived together, walking slowly along the familiar path they had traveled every Sunday for years. Her dress was likely modest by modern standards, especially among ordinary villagers. It may have been made from freshly woven linen or carefully dyed wool, stitched by loving hands over many evenings. Her hair might have been neatly braided beneath a simple veil, decorated with fresh flowers gathered from nearby meadows. There were no elaborate gowns stretching across the floor. No sparkling tiaras. Beauty came through simplicity. The groom arrived with his own family, dressed in his finest tunic, clean boots, and perhaps a newly mended cloak reserved for important occasions. His clothing spoke not of great wealth but of care and respect for the day. As everyone gathered inside the church, a peaceful silence settled across the room. The village priest stepped forward, offering prayers and blessings before guiding the couple through the promises of marriage. The exact words varied across different regions and centuries, but their meaning remained remarkably familiar. They promised faithfulness, support, partnership, a shared future. Unlike the dramatic wedding scenes often shown in modern films, medieval ceremonies were usually brief and deeply meaningful. There were no orchestras swelling at precisely the right moment. No elaborate stage decorations. No photographers asking everyone to smile. Instead, there was simply the quiet beauty of two people making promises before those who cared about them most. In many places, the joining of hands formed an important part of the ceremony. The priest placed the couple's hands together while offering blessings for the life they hoped to build. Some couples exchanged rings if their families could provide them. These rings were often plain bands of iron, bronze, silver, or gold, depending upon the family's means. They were valued not for dazzling gemstones but for what they represented. A promise without end. As sunlight streamed gently through the church windows, tiny beams of light danced across the stone floor. Outside, birds continued singing as though joining the celebration themselves. The entire village seemed wrapped in peaceful joy. When the ceremony came to an end, the newly married couple stepped outside together. The church bells rang once more, echoing across the fields and forests beyond. Neighbors smiled warmly. Children clapped excitedly. Older relatives embraced one another, grateful to witness another happy beginning. There was no shower of confetti. Instead, cheerful wishes, warm handshakes, and heartfelt blessings surrounded the couple as everyone prepared for the next part of the day. The celebration. For medieval weddings, the ceremony itself was only the beginning. The real festivities were still waiting. As our peaceful morning stroll comes to a close, we leave the little stone church behind and follow the happy crowd back toward the village green, where long wooden tables are already being prepared beneath the shade of ancient oak trees. In the next part of our journey, we'll join the wedding feast itself, a day filled with music, laughter, dancing, simple games, delicious food, and the joyful spirit of a community celebrating not just two people, but the beginning of a brand new family. The feast that lasted until sunset. As the joyful ringing of the church bells slowly fades into the distance, our little procession leaves the stone church and follows the winding path back toward the heart of the village. The morning sun has climbed higher into the sky, bathing the cottages in warm golden light. Along the roadside, wildflowers sway gently in the breeze, while children skip ahead of the adults, their laughter echoing across the quiet countryside. The wedding vows have been spoken. Now, the celebration truly begins. For many medieval villagers, the feast was the happiest part of the entire day. It was a rare opportunity to set aside the endless rhythm of work and simply enjoy being together. Fields could wait until tomorrow. The sheep would still be grazing in the meadow, and the bread could be baked again the following morning. Today belonged to joy. As we arrive at the village green, the familiar open space has been transformed. Long wooden tables stand beneath towering oak trees, covered with simple linen cloths and decorated with bunches of freshly picked flowers. Clay jugs filled with ale and cider sit beside baskets overflowing with warm bread, while the delicious aroma of roasted meat drifts lazily through the air. The feast is not extravagant by modern standards, but after weeks of careful preparation, it feels wonderfully abundant. There are hearty vegetable stews simmering over open fires, fresh cheeses made from the village dairy, roasted chickens, smoked fish from nearby rivers, honey, butter, apples, pears, onions, herbs, and thick slices of dark bread still warm from the baker's oven. For many guests, this may be one of the finest meals they enjoy all year. No one eats in silence. Conversation flows as naturally as the nearby stream. Neighbors exchange stories from past weddings. Grandparents recall celebrations from their own youth, smiling as they remember dances that lasted long into the night. Children eagerly compare who has collected the biggest slice of honey cake, while dogs wander patiently beneath the tables, hoping that a generous guest might accidentally or perhaps intentionally drop a tasty scrap. The newly married couple move from table to table, thanking everyone who has helped make this day possible. There are no carefully organized seating charts or printed place cards. Families simply gather wherever there is room, welcoming anyone who wishes to join them. The atmosphere is relaxed, comfortable, filled with familiar faces. As the afternoon unfolds, the village musicians begin tuning their instruments. A fiddler draws his bow across the strings. A piper plays a cheerful melody. A small drum joins the rhythm, followed by the bright notes of a wooden flute. Soon enough, someone stands, laughing, and invites the first dancers onto the open grass. At first, only a few couples join. Then several more. Before long, nearly the entire village is dancing. Unlike the graceful court dances we witnessed in the noble castles, these dances are lively and wonderfully uncomplicated. People form circles, hold hands, clap along with the music, and step together in patterns everyone has known since childhood. There is no concern about perfection. Missing a step often leads to even louder laughter. The bride and groom naturally become the center of attention for a while, but not because they perform a carefully rehearsed dance. Instead, they simply enjoy themselves alongside everyone else. Their happiness spreads through the crowd as easily as the music itself. As the day continues, friendly games begin. Children race one another across the meadow. Young men test their strength by tossing heavy stones or competing in simple contests of skill. Older villagers cheer from the shade, offering good-natured advice whether anyone has asked for it or not. Somewhere nearby, a storyteller gathers a small audience beneath an ancient oak tree, entertaining children with tales of clever foxes, wandering pilgrims, and brave saints. The afternoon passes almost without anyone noticing. The sun drifts slowly across the sky. Shadows grow a little longer. The air cools ever so slightly. Yet no one seems eager for the day to end. Weddings remind the entire community of something deeply comforting. Life continues. Children grow into adults. Friends become husbands and wives. One household becomes two, and before long, those households may welcome children of their own. The village itself lives on through each new generation. As evening approaches, the feast becomes quieter. Some guests wander through the nearby fields enjoying the cool breeze. Others remain seated, talking softly while watching the younger children play their final games before bedtime. The musicians slow their melodies, choosing gentle tunes that seem perfectly suited to the golden light of sunset. The bride and groom steal a peaceful moment together at the edge of the village. From here, they can see the patchwork of fields stretching toward the distant hills, just as they have every day of their lives. Only now, they see it together. Tomorrow, ordinary life will return. The cows will still need milking. Bread will still need baking. The fields will still need tending. Marriage has not freed them from work. Instead, it has given them someone with whom to share it. Perhaps that is one of the quietest truths about medieval love. The happiest part was never the feast itself. It was the ordinary days that followed. Building a home. Facing each season together. Finding comfort in familiar routines. Growing old side by side. As the final rays of sunlight slip below the horizon, lanterns begin to glow around the village green. The last dance comes to an end, the final song fades into the evening air, and one by one, neighbors begin making their way home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The wedding day is over, but another chapter of life has only just begun. And as our own peaceful journey continues, we'll soon step inside the newly married couple's humble home to discover what everyday married life was really like in the Middle Ages, how husbands and wives shared work, built families, and found quiet moments of happiness in the gentle rhythm of ordinary days. Everyday married life. Building a home together. The laughter of the wedding feast has faded into memory, and the village rests peacefully beneath a blanket of stars. One by one, the lanterns have been extinguished, the musicians have packed away their instruments, and even the last glowing embers of the cooking fires have begun to cool. Above, the moon quietly watches over the sleeping countryside, while a gentle breeze rustles through the wheat fields beyond the cottages. By the time the first birds begin to sing, another ordinary morning has arrived. The church bells ring softly across the valley, just as they did yesterday and the day before. Smoke rises from the chimneys, roosters announce the dawn with great enthusiasm, and sleepy villagers step outside to greet another day. But for one young couple, life has changed. Yesterday they were newlyweds. Today they are husband and wife. And now, the real story begins. When we think about romance, it is easy to focus on first meetings, heartfelt promises, or joyful wedding celebrations. Yet for medieval couples, Marriage was not the end of the journey, it was the beginning of a partnership that would shape nearly every part of their lives. Most newly married villagers did not move into grand houses or spacious cottages of their own overnight. Depending on local customs and family circumstances, many couples continued living with parents or close relatives for a time, sharing both the work and the responsibilities of the household. Others were fortunate enough to begin life in a small cottage of their own. Imagine one such home. It is built from sturdy oak beams with walls of woven branches covered in clay and straw. The thick thatched roof keeps out most of the rain, while tiny windows allow just enough daylight to brighten the single main room. At the center of the house burns a small hearth. Above it hangs a blackened cooking pot, gently bubbling with a hearty vegetable stew. Simple wooden stools surround a rough-hewn table polished smooth by years of use. There are no separate bedrooms as we know them today. No electric lights. No running water. No central heating. And yet, to the young couple standing in the doorway, this little cottage feels wonderfully full of possibility. It is home. The day begins early. Long before sunrise has fully brightened the fields, the wife stirs the glowing embers of last night's fire back to life. Fresh water is brought from the village well, oats are prepared for breakfast, and bread baked earlier in the week is sliced for the morning meal. Meanwhile, her husband steps outside into the cool morning air. He feeds the chickens scratching around the yard, checks on the family's goat or cow, gathers tools, and prepares for another day in the fields. Although their work often differs, it is shared in purpose. Everything they do supports the household they are building together. Throughout the seasons, the rhythm rarely changes. Spring brings planting. Summer demands long days beneath the warm sun. Autumn fills the barns with harvested grain and stacked firewood. Winter draws everyone closer to the comforting warmth of the hearth. Each season brings its own challenges. Each season also brings its own quiet rewards. Imagine a warm summer afternoon. The husband returns from the fields carrying freshly cut vegetables gathered along the edge of the garden. His wife has spent the morning spinning wool into thread while keeping a watchful eye on bread baking in the oven. Without needing many words, they begin preparing the evening meal together. One washes vegetables. The other gathers herbs. Soon, the comforting aroma of stew fills the little cottage once again. There is something deeply peaceful about these familiar routines. No day is especially exciting. But neither is it empty. Small moments quietly become treasured memories. Sharing the first ripe strawberries of summer. Watching rain gently fall outside while sitting beside the fire. Laughing together after a curious chicken wanders into the house once again. Listening to church bells drifting across the valley on a calm Sunday morning. These moments rarely found their way into medieval songs or heroic legends. Yet they formed the heart of everyday married life. Of course, marriage was not always effortless. Disagreements happened, just as they do today. Life could be tiring. Harvests sometimes failed. Animals became ill. Storms damaged crops. Winters felt long. But couples faced these difficulties together. The strength of a marriage was often measured not by how joyful life was during easy seasons, but by how faithfully two people supported one another through difficult ones. Neighbors played an important role as well. In a medieval village, no household stood completely alone. If someone's roof needed repairing after a storm, friends often appeared with spare timber and willing hands. If illness struck, neighbors might quietly deliver bread, firewood, or warm meals. Marriage did not separate couples from their community. Instead, it made them an even stronger part of it. As the afternoon slowly seasons of family life. As the last glow of sunset fades beyond the rolling hills, the little cottage grows quiet. The fire in the hearth burns low, filling the room with a warm amber light that dances gently across the timber walls. Outside, crickets sing beneath a sky scattered with countless stars, while a cool night breeze rustles through the thatched roofs of the sleeping village. Hours pass peacefully. The moon drifts slowly overhead, and eventually, the first hint of dawn begins to brighten the eastern horizon once again. A robin sings from the garden fence, followed by another, and then another, until the countryside is alive with birdsong. Another day begins. As we quietly step back inside the cottage, we notice something has changed. Time has moved forward. The newly married couple who welcomed us into their home in the last chapter are no longer adjusting to married life alone. Tiny wooden toys now rest near the hearth. A small blanket hangs beside the fire to dry after yesterday's washing. Soft laughter echoes from the corner of the room as little feet patter across the worn wooden floor. Children have arrived. For many medieval families, children were welcomed with great joy. They brought hope for the future, helping ensure that the household and the village itself would continue into another generation. Life expectancy was often uncertain, and childhood could be difficult, making every healthy child a precious blessing. Parents cared deeply for their children, even if the realities of medieval life meant youngsters began helping with simple chores from an early age. A small boy might proudly carry kindling for the fire, though his bundle was hardly larger than his arms could hold. A little girl might eagerly gather eggs from the hens, smiling with pride each time she returned without dropping a single one. The chores were simple. The lessons gentle. No one expected perfection. Learning happened one ordinary day at a time. As the years passed, the family settled into a comforting rhythm shaped by the changing seasons. Spring always felt like a fresh beginning. The fields turned green once more after the long winter. Lambs skipped across the meadows, apple trees burst into blossom, and children eagerly searched for the first wildflowers blooming beside familiar paths. There was work to be done, of course. Seeds needed planting. Gardens needed tending. Fences damaged by winter storms required repair. Yet spring also carried a feeling of quiet optimism. Every sunrise seemed to promise that warmer days were ahead. Then came summer. The days stretched long beneath bright blue skies, giving families extra hours to work together. Children often followed their parents into the fields, learning by watching rather than through formal lessons. During breaks, everyone rested beneath shady trees, sharing bread, cheese, onions, and cool water while listening to bees humming among the wildflowers. Sometimes the youngest children fell asleep in the grass while their parents smiled quietly nearby. Autumn arrived dressed in shades of gold and crimson. The harvest brought some of the busiest weeks of the year. Entire families worked side by side gathering wheat, barley, oats, apples, and vegetables before winter arrived. Neighbors helped one another, knowing that everyone's success depended upon cooperation. When the final wagon of grain was safely stored in the barn, there was always a wonderful feeling of relief. Another season had been completed. Then winter settled gently across the countryside. Snow softened the fields. Bare branches stretched toward pale grey skies. The pace of life slowed. Evenings grew wonderfully cozy inside the little cottage. The family gathered around the crackling fire while the wind whispered softly outside. Children listened wide-eyed as grandparents shared old stories they had heard from their own grandparents many decades before. Some tales spoke of clever foxes, others of wandering pilgrims. Some told of brave saints, mysterious forests, or kings whose names had long since faded into history. These stories connected one generation to the next, passing along not only entertainment but also wisdom, humor, and treasured family memories. As the children grew older, they slowly took on greater responsibilities. The little boy who once carried tiny bundles of firewood now helped his father repair fences. The little girl who proudly collected eggs learned to bake bread beside her mother. Just as we saw at the beginning of our journey, childhood quietly gave way to adulthood. The circle continued. Years passed almost unnoticed. The young couple who once blushed while exchanging smiles after church now watched their own children laugh together in the same village lanes. Their hair slowly began to show threads of silver. Their hands grew rougher with years of honest work. Fine lines appeared beside smiling eyes. Yet something else had quietly grown as well. Comfort. The kind of comfort that only many shared years can bring. They no longer needed grand gestures to express affection. A warm loaf of bread waiting on the table after a long day. A blanket gently placed over tired shoulders during a cold winter evening. A familiar smile exchanged across the room. These simple acts carried all the love that words sometimes could not. Perhaps that is one of the greatest lessons hidden within everyday medieval marriage. Love was rarely measured by extraordinary moments. Instead, it was woven into thousands of ordinary ones. Sharing work. Sharing meals. Sharing worries. Sharing laughter. Sharing the quiet peace of another sunrise together. As evening returns once more, our little family steps outside their cottage. The children race ahead toward the village green while their parents walk more slowly behind, hand in hand. Above them, swallows glide through the golden evening sky, and the church bell rings softly in the distance, just as it has throughout every chapter of our journey. The seasons continue to turn. Children become parents. Parents become grandparents. Life moves forward with remarkable gentleness. And as darkness slowly settles across the peaceful countryside, we prepare for the final part of our adventure. We'll take one last unhurried walk through the medieval village, reflecting on the quiet beauty of courtship, marriage, and companionship before saying a gentle goodnight to this peaceful world we've come to know so well. Seasons of family life. As the last glow of sunset fades beyond the rolling hills, the little cottage grows quiet. The fire in the hearth burns low, filling the room with a warm amber light that dances gently across the timber walls. Outside, crickets sing beneath a sky scattered with countless stars, while a cool night breeze rustles through the thatched roofs of the sleeping village. Hours pass peacefully. The moon drifts slowly overhead, and eventually, the first hint of dawn begins to brighten the eastern horizon once again. A robin sings from the garden fence, followed by another, and then another, until the countryside is alive with birdsong. Another day begins. As we quietly step back inside the cottage, we notice something has changed. Time has moved forward. The newly married couple who welcomed us into their home in the last chapter are no longer adjusting to married life alone. Tiny wooden toys now rest near the hearth. A small blanket hangs beside the fire to dry after yesterday's washing. Soft laughter echoes from the corner of the room as little feet patter across the worn wooden floor. Children have arrived. For many medieval families, children were welcomed with great joy. They brought hope for the future, helping ensure that the household and the village itself would continue into another generation. Life expectancy was often uncertain, and childhood could be difficult, making every healthy child a precious blessing. Parents cared deeply for their children, even if the realities of medieval life meant youngsters began helping with simple chores from an early age. A small boy might proudly carry kindling for the fire, though his bundle was hardly larger than his arms could hold. A little girl might eagerly gather eggs from the hens, smiling with pride each time she returned without dropping a single one. The chores were simple. The lessons gentle. No one expected perfection. Learning happened one ordinary day at a time. As the years passed, the family settled into a comforting rhythm shaped by the changing seasons. Spring always felt like a fresh beginning. The fields turned green once more after the long winter. Lambs skipped across the meadows, apple trees burst into blossom, and children eagerly searched for the first wildflowers blooming beside familiar paths. There was work to be done, of course. Seeds needed planting. Gardens needed tending. Fences damaged by winter storms required repair. Yet spring also carried a feeling of quiet optimism. Every sunrise seemed to promise that warmer days were ahead. Then came summer. The days stretched long beneath bright blue skies, giving families extra hours to work together. Children often followed their parents into the fields, learning by watching rather than through formal lessons. During breaks, everyone rested beneath shady trees, sharing bread, cheese, onions, and cool water while listening to bees humming among the wildflowers. Sometimes the youngest children fell asleep in the grass while their parents smiled quietly nearby. Autumn arrived dressed in shades of gold and crimson. The harvest brought some of the busiest weeks of the year. Entire families worked side by side gathering wheat, barley, oats, apples, and vegetables before winter arrived. Neighbors helped one another, knowing that everyone's success depended upon cooperation. When the final wagon of grain was safely stored in the barn, there was always a wonderful feeling of relief. Another season had been completed. Then winter settled gently across the countryside. Snow softened the fields. Bare branches stretched toward pale grey skies. The pace of life slowed. Evenings grew wonderfully cozy inside the little cottage. The family gathered around the crackling fire while the wind whispered softly outside. Children listened wide-eyed as grandparents shared old stories they had heard from their own grandparents many decades before. Some tales spoke of clever foxes, others of wandering pilgrims. Some told of brave saints, mysterious forests, or kings whose names had long since faded into history. These stories connected one generation to the next, passing along not only entertainment but also wisdom, humor, and treasured family memories. As the children grew older, they slowly took on greater responsibilities. The little boy who once carried tiny bundles of firewood now helped his father repair fences. The little girl who proudly collected eggs learned to bake bread beside her mother. Just as we saw at the beginning of our journey, childhood quietly gave way to adulthood. The circle continued. Years passed almost unnoticed. The young couple who once blushed while exchanging smiles after church now watched their own children laugh together in the same village lanes. Their hair slowly began to show threads of silver. Their hands grew rougher with years of honest work. Fine lines appeared beside smiling eyes. Yet something else had quietly grown as well. Comfort. The kind of comfort that only many shared years can bring. They no longer needed grand gestures to express affection. A warm loaf of bread waiting on the table after a long day. A blanket gently placed over tired shoulders during a cold winter evening. A familiar smile exchanged across the room. These simple acts carried all the love that words sometimes could not. Perhaps that is one of the greatest lessons hidden within everyday medieval marriage. Love was rarely measured by extraordinary moments. Instead, it was woven into thousands of ordinary ones. Sharing work. Sharing meals. Sharing worries. Sharing laughter. Sharing the quiet peace of another sunrise together. As evening returns once more, our little family steps outside their cottage. The children race ahead toward the village green while their parents walk more slowly behind, hand in hand. Above them, swallows glide through the golden evening sky, and the church bell rings softly in the distance, just as it has throughout every chapter of our journey. The seasons continue to turn. Children become parents. Parents become grandparents. Life moves forward with remarkable gentleness. And as darkness slowly settles across the peaceful countryside, we prepare for the final part of our adventure. We'll take one last unhurried walk through the medieval village, reflecting on the quiet beauty of courtship, marriage, and companionship before saying a gentle goodnight to this peaceful world we've come to know so well. Love through the seasons. A lifetime in the same village. A gentle morning mist once again blankets the fields we've wandered through for so many peaceful days. The little stone church stands quietly in the distance, its weathered bell tower catching the first golden light of sunrise. Birds glide above the rooftops, smoke curls lazily from familiar chimneys, and the winding paths between the cottages seem almost unchanged. As we walk through the village one more time, everything feels comfortingly familiar. The baker is already tending his oven. The blacksmith's forge glows softly. Sheep graze in the meadow beyond the stream. Children laugh somewhere behind the cottages, their cheerful voices carried gently on the breeze. And it is here, among these familiar sights and sounds, that we begin to notice something remarkable. Although the seasons have changed countless times, many of the people have remained. Unlike our modern world, where moving to a different town or even another country is common, most ordinary medieval villagers spent nearly their entire lives in the same community. They were born here. They grew up here. They married here. And many would one day be buried in the churchyard beside generations of their own family. To modern ears, such a life might sound small. Yet there was something deeply comforting about its familiarity. Every path held a memory. Every tree had watched children grow into adults. Every cottage carried stories that stretched back decades. Imagine walking through the village beside an elderly couple. Many years ago, we first met them as shy young villagers exchanging quiet smiles after Sunday church. Now their hair has turned silver. Their steps are slower. But they still know every corner of this place by heart. As they pass the old village well, the husband smiles gently. "Do you remember," he might quietly ask, "when we first met here after the market?" His wife laughs softly. "You were so nervous you nearly dropped the water bucket." Neither memory changed history. Neither appeared in a grand chronicle or an illuminated manuscript. Yet to them, those ordinary moments became life's greatest treasures. Perhaps that is the quiet magic of memory. It transforms simple days into stories worth carrying for a lifetime. As we continue walking, spring fills the countryside once more. The fields glow green. Apple blossoms perfume the air. Young couples stroll home after church, talking quietly just as our elderly pair once did many decades earlier. Watching them, the older husband smiles knowingly. He remembers exactly what it felt like. The uncertainty. The excitement. The hope. Nothing has really changed. Summer soon follows. The village hums with activity as families work together beneath long sunny days. Grandchildren now help gather vegetables in the same gardens where their grandparents once played as children. The elderly couple no longer works as quickly as they once did. Instead, they offer advice. They teach. They encourage. Their greatest harvest is no longer grain. It is experience. Autumn arrives dressed in rich shades of amber and crimson. The harvest festival fills the village green with music once again. Children dance exactly as their parents did years before. Musicians play the same familiar tunes. Fresh bread fills the air with its comforting aroma. The elderly couple sit quietly beneath the great oak tree. Rather than joining every dance, they smile while watching others. Sometimes happiness comes not from being at the center of the celebration, but from seeing others create beautiful memories of their own. Winter eventually wraps the countryside beneath frost and silence. Snow rests softly upon the cottage roofs. Smoke rises steadily into pale grey skies. Inside, the family gathers once again around the hearth. Grandchildren climb eagerly onto their grandparents' laps. "Tell us the story again," they ask. "The one about how you first met." The old couple exchange amused glances. The tale has been told dozens of times. Perhaps hundreds. Yet every child listens as though hearing it for the very first time. The husband chuckles softly. It all began after Sunday church. And so the story continues. Simple. Gentle. Familiar. Outside, snowflakes drift quietly through the night while the fire crackles warmly inside. The years have brought wrinkles, grey hair, and slower footsteps. But they have also brought something else. A friendship strengthened by countless ordinary days. A love no longer built upon excitement alone, but upon trust, patience, shared laughter, and quiet companionship. Perhaps this is the greatest lesson our peaceful journey has offered. Romance may begin with butterflies and hopeful smiles. But lasting love is built through ordinary mornings, shared meals, familiar conversations, and thousands of little kindnesses repeated over many years. As the fire burns lower and the family slowly prepares for sleep, our elderly couple step outside for one last look at the stars. The same stars watched over them when they were children. The same stars shone above their wedding day. The same stars now shine upon another generation beginning their own stories. The village has changed little. Life continues. And somewhere nearby, another young couple is probably exchanging a shy smile for the very first time. As our quiet evening draws to a close, we leave the old couple standing peacefully beneath the winter sky. The quiet rhythm of growing old together. The stars slowly fade, giving way to another peaceful dawn. A thin veil of mist drifts across the meadows as the rising sun paints the eastern sky with soft shades of gold and pale pink. The village stirs gently to life once more. A rooster crows from somewhere beyond the cottages, birds flutter between the hedgerows, and the familiar church bell echoes across the valley, just as it has every morning throughout our journey. Our final walk through the seasons begins. We have wandered these paths together for many days now. We have watched children become young adults, friendships become courtships, courtships become marriages, and marriages become families. Time has moved quietly around us, almost as gently as the breeze that now rustles through the barley fields. If we pause for a moment beside the old oak tree at the edge of the village green, we might notice a familiar couple walking slowly toward us. Years have passed since their wedding feast. Their steps are no longer quick, but they move together without thinking, matching each other's pace as naturally as they breathe. One carries a small basket of apples gathered from the orchard. The other steadies the basket whenever the path becomes uneven. Neither asks for help. Neither needs to. After a lifetime together, they have learned one another's movements almost by heart. Perhaps this is one of the quietest kinds of love. Not the excitement of first meetings. Not the flutter of wondering whether someone might smile back. But the deep comfort of always knowing that someone is beside you. The village itself seems to recognize them. The baker waves as they pass. The blacksmith pauses from his work to offer a cheerful greeting. Children race by, laughing as they play tag around the well, just as their grandparents once did many decades before. The couple smile. They remember doing exactly the same thing. Life has a gentle way of repeating itself. As the seasons continue their endless cycle, the elderly pair no longer rush to every harvest or every village celebration. Instead, they watch the younger generation take their place. A grandson proudly leads a horse for the first time. A granddaughter learns to knead bread beneath her mother's patient guidance. Another young couple strolls home after Sunday church, speaking softly as though the rest of the world has disappeared. The older husband notices them and chuckles. "I think we've seen that look before." His wife smiles knowingly. "Yes," she replies. "A very long time ago." There is no sadness in their voices. Only gratitude. The years have not taken away the joy of those memories. They have simply made them gentler. On warm summer evenings, they often sit together on a simple wooden bench outside their cottage. There is no great entertainment. No urgent plans. Only the pleasant sounds of village life drifting through the cooling air. A shepherd whistles while bringing his flock home. Swallows dart across the orange sky. The smell of fresh bread floats from the baker's oven. The church bell marks the end of another peaceful day. Sometimes they speak. Sometimes they simply sit in comfortable silence. Silence, after all, feels different when shared with someone who knows you well. It no longer asks to be filled. Autumn arrives once more, and the leaves begin their slow dance to the ground. The grandchildren eagerly help gather apples while the older couple watches from beneath the same oak tree where they once courted as young villagers. One child asks, "Grandfather, were you ever young?" The old man laughs so warmly that even the nearby chickens seem startled. "Oh, I certainly was." "Were you brave?" "Not at first." "Were you nervous when you met grandmother?" He glances toward his wife with a smile that has survived a lifetime. "Very nervous." The children giggle. It seems impossible to imagine their calm, wise grandfather ever feeling shy. Yet he did. Just like every young heart before him. Winter returns quietly, covering the fields with frost. Inside the cottage, the fire crackles softly while the family gathers close together. The grandchildren listen to old stories they already know by heart, yet somehow never grow tired of hearing. Stories of market days, harvest dances, wedding feasts, wildflowers gathered beside the lane, the first ribbon tied to a satchel, the first smile after church. These are not tales of kings conquering kingdoms or knights defeating dragons. They are stories of ordinary people. And perhaps that is why they feel so timeless. Because most lives are built not from extraordinary moments, but from thousands of ordinary ones stitched together with patience and kindness. As our own journey nears its end, the village grows peaceful once again. The last light fades from the western sky. Candles flicker gently behind cottage windows. The church bell rings one final time before settling into silence. Somewhere in the distance, a young couple begins a story much like the one we have just followed. They do not know what joys or hardships lie ahead. But neither did anyone else. They simply take the first step together. And perhaps that has always been enough. As we leave the village behind, only one gentle walk remains. We'll wander beneath a sky filled with stars, reflecting on everything we've discovered about medieval courtship, companionship, and the quiet beauty of a life shared one ordinary day at a time, before bidding this peaceful little village a fond and sleepy good night.